But uniting Israelis and Palestinians, that's something you could run with. If you could do that, I could unite Israelis and Palestinians through music and nobody else could. Because I would go to a dinner party and I would say, guess where I was earlier today? So where I was in a house and one guy was Israeli and the other guy was Palestinian. We were playing jazz. Those guys are supposed to be like at war. They're supposed to hate it. So people were shocked.
UnLost Cause is a community that shares stories of individuals 40 and beyond who found the courage to reclaim their dreams and live without regrets. I'm David New, and I hope these stories help you find joy, purpose, and passion in a life true to you. Today, I'm excited to bring you the story of Rick DellaRatta, a jazz pianist, composer, vocalist, author, and visionary founder of Jazz for Peace. After witnessing 9/11 from a rooftop just a few blocks away, Rick turned what could have been a lost moment into a global movement promoting unity and raising consciousness through music. Rick, welcome to UnLost Cause.
Thank you so much, David, for having me. I love the way the whole groove of your show. You know what I mean? The theme of it is what I really mean.
Awesome. And then Rick, before we dive in, can you level set with the audience by sharing in like 2 or 3 sentences the context of what is your lost cause that you made into an unlost cause and you brought to life?
Well, we live in a world where we're taught to go, we have been, I think we're in a transformation. I think we're going on a transformation. Humankind is in it. And I was growing up in the precipice of that, which was a situation where it was very standardized. You went to school, then you went to college to become something, and then you did that specific job, whether it was a dentist or a this or a that, and you did that specific thing to, as part of the fabric of the community or whatever, and you did that, and maybe you were rewarded, hopefully, with at least a white picket fence and a house or something, what the American dream or whatever.
Yeah, the American dream.
But, I noticed growing up that there was a lot of confusion related to that because I remembered going to a conservatory where they had classical music. Many great classical musicians had graduated. And I would be like, someone's father is in the Boston Symphony, but the person, when they talked about their father, would be like, oh, my father, oh, my God, like something wasn't right. And I'm like, well, what could be wrong? He's got a great symphony job. He's got steady income. He's got steady, but you could tell that there was something maybe that was lacking, that the child was, that the daughter was feeling, whatever. So I was noticing to myself, I was having my own thoughts, my own visions, my own dreams. I was noticing I had my own interpretation of the way the world was spinning. And yet I was also having unique experiences as a musician where I traveled around the world and I saw the connectiveness between the arts and culture and music and people. And I saw the amazing way that it brought people together in a positive way, and that all kinds of information was communicated between an artist and a listener that you might not be able to communicate otherwise, especially if you didn't even speak the same language, what big difference between, let's say, me walking the streets of Japan and someone listening to me play and me watching them, react. What a difference that would be than just walking down the street, and asking where the supermarket is or something. So I'd had all of that. And then there was the event of 9/11. And that was a turning point for me to decide, listen, maybe I should try to walk the walk for a couple of days and offer my perspective, offer my contribution, and just see if I can come out of the box here and contribute something based on my own personal experience rather than my musical talent.
Got it. And then, at Unlost Cause, one of the things that we talk about is, people's like childhoods, because a lot of the seeds of who they become or their passions is rooted there. So if I got this correctly, you grew up in New York and you were the oldest of 5 kids. Is that correct?
All correct. Upstate New York, though, not here. Yeah.
Oh, upstate New York. Okay, well, why don't we start by sharing with the listeners, what was Rick's childhood like when you were growing up?
I was in a small town called Schenectady, New York. It was pretty, a lot of beautiful things. There were lakes nearby. There were mountains nearby, the Adirondack Mountains. There were all these things that I just thought, everybody had. I just assumed that everybody had these pretty lakes and these pretty mountains and all that. And it was relatively, rural, or is it, yeah, I don't know, it was country compared to here. It was definitely the countryside compared to New York City. And it was a musical family because my father had been a classical musician himself, studied the French horn, and had really wanted to, his passion was, most of his life, his passion was to be a musician. And he was in a transition where he was starting a law practice and still kind of had one foot as a musician. I think he was subbing in the Albany Symphony or something like that with one foot, and the other foot was trying to get himself going as an attorney. So that was that situation. And then unbeknownst to me, until the piano arrived in the house, my mother was a musician. I didn't know that. But on Christmas Eve, I'm staying up to try to catch Santa Claus, and I saw some giant thing kind of come in the door. And I was like, wow, I definitely caught Santa Claus this time. He's moving something really big into the house, and I'm just going to go to bed and cut my losses here so I don't get caught, staying awake. I was supposed to be asleep long ago. And the thing that he brought in the front door was a piano. And then I saw my mother playing the piano, my father playing the French horn, doing Mozart horn concertos and things of that nature. And so I was kind of off to the races. And I was trying to figure out the piano on my own. I was trying to figure out what the heck this is, why would Santa Claus go through all that trouble just for us, and what is this thing? So one thing led to another, but that was the start of both improvising, because I was trying to figure it out on my own, and my musical journey, because I did get caught trying to figure it out on my own and ended up in piano lessons.
Yeah. So would you say that you're a self-taught pianist, or is that you were just messing around before your parents said, you know what, Rick's got some talent, we're going to get a proper instruction?
Well, what happened was I, for some reason, wanted to figure it out on my own. I don't know what got into me, but the fact that I was doing it and didn't get caught for a while, because I would kind of make sure nobody was around. I didn't want anybody to hear me try to do that, because I was shy and embarrassed at what I was going to play on my own, So I was keeping it a secret a while. Somebody ratted me out, I don't know who. But so then by the time I started studying, so maybe it was a few months or so, I don't know, could have been a few months. But by the time I did end up in piano lessons, I didn't want to stop my personal explorations. So I was doing both. In fact, there were times when my parents kept an eye on me a little bit to make sure I even did my practicing. It's like, hey, wait a minute, are you going to practice your lesson, or what's going on here? So the two of them were going in tandem. One, because I did admire the music I was studying. I was like, man, this music is a pain in the ass to learn all these notes, but I cannot deny these composers. I can't deny Bach and Mozart and Chopin. There was something about them. And then there was the music in my school. So I had that as going on as well. That was a big thing. Well, that was an even bigger thing, because that could make your friends think you were cool and all that,
And then what age were you when the piano showed up and you started?
I was six when the piano showed up. And then I was, in lessons, and I was doing well in that. And then, like I said, one thing did start leading to another, where my homeroom teacher asked me to play in his son's band that was going to play the school dances, so that was bringing me into the pop music of the day. And then there was a grown-up band that promised my mother they would pick me up and take me back and keep an eye on me so I didn't get into trouble in these kind of adult places where I wasn't really allowed, so I could play in their band. And that enabled me to hear all the other music of Frank Sinatra and all, whatever, all the other styles of music, Elvis Presley, all, the whole gamut that you play at private parties and stuff.
So did you learn, was your passion for music because you admire your dad and your mom and their musical background? Or when you touch that key and you produce that sound, music, something lit up in you that was more kind of internal, where you're like, wow, I feel different, I sense different, and you loved it? Like, where was that motivation when you started getting into music?
Probably getting strong messages from different areas. I mean, one was when I did see my mother and father play, I was like, wow, that is really impressive. A husband and wife playing the French horn part, the lead on a Mozart horn concerto, and my mother playing the orchestral score on the, and I thought, damn, that's impressive. Even if they weren't my mother and father, I would be very impressed by that. So that was just across the board impressive. That didn't necessarily make me want to be a musician, but I was like, that's something in its own right. That's an impressive thing there that's going on. And then separately, my own musical journey, now I realize what music does and improvisatory music does raise your level of human consciousness. It raises your synergy, So I was raising myself up. I was like getting this high from exploring the instrument on my own. So I had that going on. And then when I would be, let's say, with my grandmother and aunt dancing around to, let's say, the Beatles, I was like, who are those people bringing us all of this joy? Because I see a lot of people doing jobs, the guy that we had an uncle that worked at the gas station, we had a this and that, and I saw them doing this job, but I'm like, those guys are bringing a lot of joy. Like that might be, like that was the first time I saw a possibility of something that would work for me as a grown-up. You know what I mean? Like this could work for me. Like I could see that would be, I haven't seen anything I wanted to be a grown-up to do yet, but maybe that one, maybe that.
And then Rick, did your 4 younger siblings also follow in the footsteps and have that talent? And did they play musical instruments, or did they buck the trend, or was it like this amazing like holiday gatherings and all this beautiful sound emanating from the house?
One other brother did play a horn instrument. He could play piano too, but he did take up a horn instrument, which I assume was to the delight of my father, who was a horn instrument. So that brother did go very far in music. He went to Juilliard and stuff like that. The other brothers, they did the obligatory, they took piano lessons, but I think they kind of, just, I don't know, fell by the wayside on that. They had other interests and stuff, I presume.
And you mentioned that, your dad loved the French horn, but was starting a law practice. And I can sense some tension between like, hey, maybe putting food on the table versus something that, a passion. So did he see something special in you and try to guide you one way or the other? Like, you know what, you're going to do something like law to put food on the table. So this is just a hobby. Don't worry about it, Rick. Or did he's like, wow, you can go far, but you have to take these steps to be able to play for a living and make money?
I think he kind of took a hands-off approach to it. He never really advised me one way or the other. He kind of let me like follow my exploration to wherever it was going to lead. He never really said anything. I mean, you never heard him say, hey, why don't you study law, or why don't you study this, or why don't you do something else, or why don't you do something else as a backup? He never really said that. But I did get to the point where I was talented enough to go to make it into a conservatory to study music on a higher level. So it's kind of weird. It's kind of like, well, if you bomb out, good for you, because now you could just go get a job and you don't have to deal with all of that, But the fact that I kept excelling made it hard to cancel out, I think it's probably the same way if you're an Olympic athlete. I mean, those people, what do they get for a gold medal? Most of them don't get anything, but how are you going to tell somebody who's good enough to qualify to not go for it? It's a tough situation. So no one really advised me, but I did know personally that there was a lot of issues, because on the one hand, we're admiring and looking up to these people, right? Whether it's a Martin Luther King or whether it's a Mozart, or whether it's by the way, Mozart is talked about in this book of mine, which we'll talk about that when you want to. I did the foreword on Mozart because it's an artist perspective, and I don't think anyone's ever heard that perspective. So, but these people, even Christ, all these great people that we look up to, they all had these kind of tragic endings, So I was like, gee, it doesn't look quite as, secure a type of an existence,
Yeah. So then building on, it wasn't as secure. You were saying at a young age, there's other band members who recognize your talents that would take you so you would play your instrument and then drive you home, keep an eye on you, since these were adult settings. Were they or others role models of, I'm a professional musician, I get to do what I love, and I can, make a living out of it, that you kind of looked up to? Or was there a lack of that and you had to find your own way?
Well, there were people doing it. I think the local musicians that I played with were they were musicians on the side mostly. They did something else and then they were a musician on the side and they loved being a musician on the side. So their funnest time was when I was with them playing. And yeah, there were people, I didn't notice it, but there were people like catching on to my talent. And I was actually pulled out of my high school to play in a jazz ensemble at the school, at the college in my town, because they needed somebody to play in their college ensemble, but they didn't have anybody at the college that could play at my level. And even though I was in high school, so they worked out a deal where I went to college so I could play in their band and then got high school credit. So all kinds of little things like that were going on.
And then when they saw you playing, like, is it you can just hear like 30 seconds of someone playing, you're like, they're playing the same song as someone else is, but the way they played is just so different. You're like, that person has it or has talent, and you're just able to recognize. If you're a professional, you can just recognize it super quickly.
As a professional, but the first time it happened to me, it's very strange. I was in a stage band in my high school stage band, maybe first year in high school, so 10th grade. And I'm in the 10th grade high school stage band, and they gave us the charts, and I'm playing, playing the charts or whatever. And somehow it was recorded or whatever. And the teacher of the stage band comes into a class that I'm in and just comes up to me and whispers in my ear, like this kind of thing, like, "Hey man, I listened to the tape of, you sounded incredible," something like that. Like
just whispering in your ear. You're like, oh, that's unusual.
Really unusual, really strange. But it was almost like you see if you watch the movie Amadeus or something, where the people that recognized Mozart, they were a little bit not comfortable even, because it's like they had aspired to be that kind of a musician and now they were hearing. So it was almost like that. It was almost like a little bit of a resentful. Man, are you freaking, and I'm like, how did you even
too, right?
Yeah. And I was like, how did you even know? And is that okay? Is that a problem? You know what I mean? Like, it was a weird moment, but there are movies about it. There's one called, there's a movie, Whiplash. There's a movie called Whiplash where you see the talented musician and the kind of frustrated band director, because maybe he had aspired to be more than a band director,
Understood. And then, so now let's say your high school career concludes and you're thinking about college. Was it clear to you that you were always going to go and study music, or was there a potential other pathway of doing something, I don't know, more traditional type of college route?
I didn't have a backup plan because the only other thing I wanted to be, like I said, I was kind of selective, was a ski. I wanted to ski. I like skiing. So how am I going to get paid to ski, So I really didn't have much to fall back on, but I was just going to follow what was in front of me. And I was excelling in music as far as the community was concerned and people who had heard me and listened to me. And so I did go to a bunch of auditions for colleges. And one of the ones I went to was the New England Conservatory in Boston. And I showed up to that checking piano performance. And I'm like, oh, I'm a piano performer. I play with these grown-ups. I play with the school. I play with the this and that. And all they want to hear me play was classical music. Because again, in their matriculatory curriculum, piano performance only meant Bach, Chopin, that's it. But I played Bach, and I got accepted into that. So I was like, well, I guess I'll go then. If I was accepted, I might as well go. It's more like that. It was more, well, if nobody wanted me, then it's time to think of another profession. But if people keep choosing me and selecting me, I might as well just keep, going.
And are those programs like 2-year programs, 4-year programs, and then what do they do any like classical, like liberal arts, or is it only like music theory and practice?
That place is no liberal arts. I mean, you get a music degree. I believe it can be music education, but it was really a performance. They were really turning out performers, and mostly turning out performers that are going to try to get a job in a symphony, or something like that. Where again, it's almost like a target practice, like a firing range, where it's really all about playing the right notes and learning the pieces quickly and sight reading, all that. It's more skill set, than let's say artistry, But I was developing as an artist because I was playing all styles of music. And I was one of the few people in that school that could play all styles of music.
I would imagine being able to play like, they talk about an athlete, let's just say like skiing, right? But if they played like baseball, soccer, that those other muscle movements help them become a better hand-eye coordination skier. And so your ability to play jazz and all these other types, did it make you a better musician in all facets because you're able to draw and learn from other muscle memory or brain connections?
Music stimulates the intellect in a very big way. So there's probably no doubt that I was getting stimuli. I was constantly being stimulated from playing music and for playing so many styles of music. I mean, having to groove in a funky type of band and then going and playing in a string quartet or something. So it was really a lot of stimuli. There's a lot of mental, like there's just a lot of cognitive, a lot going on. So like I said, music is a stimulator of the intellect. So that's why it breaks my heart when I see, schools pulling out their music program or not doing opportunities that they have right in front of them that could have a profoundly positive effect on the children with music.
So then you graduate. So that's would you say it was a 4-year program?
Well, the thing was, at the end of my 4 years, I was kind of mentored a little bit by one of these guys who was a classical composer, but he was a jazz pianist. So in other words, this transformation was starting. You were starting to see things, it wasn't like as standard, like they were trying to keep everybody in the same box, in their box, but people were bleeding into other areas. And this guy, William Thomas McKinley, his name is, he was a phenomenal classical composer. At the same time, he was a jazz pianist at the same time. And I admired his musicianship and we got to know each other. And he was like, I think he was the head of the jazz department. Then he became the head of the composition. I don't know. He was at the school every year I was there. And he was like, what are you going to do after this? I said, I really don't know. I'm just going to, he says, well, why don't you stay and do a master's, I have some connections. I have some people. I'll set it up for you. So he really set it up. He introduced me to so-and-so who could give me this kind of a grant for this, a student grant for that. And I was really going there for free to get my master's. So I went for more than 4 years.
Okay, that's amazing. So then you graduate with your master's, and then so before we get into like, there's a lot, now you're in your mid 20s, before we get into your UnLost Cause, which is, decades down the road, what are some of the big kind of chapters or career highlights that in broad brush strokes for Rick, after graduation and before that 9/11 poignant event?
Well, career highlights that would resonate to the average person was, I played in well-known ensembles. One was the Artie Shaw Orchestra, which was a very famous big band that traveled all around the United States. If you ever look up, like in the old big band era, there was like the Duke Ellington and Glenn Miller and, Artie Shaw. I mean, those are like 3 of the biggest big bands. So I was also an opening act and MC for a jazz legend named Dizzy Gillespie. And I also played with a band that was famous in the 1950s called the Platters. But I also started to record under my own name because the thing was, I was a singer, I was a pianist, and I was a jazz musician. So I wanted to eventually present myself in a way where people could hear my compositions, they could hear my jazz instrumental playing, and they could hear, my vocal, rather than as a sideman where I was only doing one of those 3 or 2 of those 3. So I had numerous CDs out before 9/11. 7. No, not 7, but I had a few. I don't think I had 7 out by then. Maybe I had like 3 CDs out by that time. I did. 3 CDs out at that time.
So Rick, so you're touring with these notable bands, but in the back of your mind, you're still thinking, you want to produce your own music where it highlights your ability to compose, to sing, to play. So what were some of the things that you had to focus on to make that a reality? Because your day job is you're playing in these big bands. Are you just making connections? Are you still working on it? Are you, trying to take different roles in different bands to fill up the gaps so that you're ready? When you're ready to jump, you've got everything in place?
Well, I was starting to get gigs as a leader. I was starting to get situations where I was the leader of the band, and there was especially a place out in Queens called the Village Door. And I kept getting called out as a sideman to play, but I was playing like a bass player would call me to play in his trio one night. A drummer would call me to play in his trio another night. None of these people were really band leaders. So the manager saw me and was like, hey, why don't you lead the bands and schedule these different people in on their different nights? But why don't you, lead all the bands? Because it was just made more sense to have, someone who was going to, do that role, more in a leader role than a sideman role. So I was doing that. And I had, again, there was kind of a shift where it used to be you had to have a record deal and you had to go into a recording studio that was expensive to make a record. But now there were these things coming out. One was called ADAT, and you could literally record like an album in your house, if you wanted to. And so I started purchasing that equipment and setting it up in the same Lower East Side apartment, which was a fifth floor walk up where I happened to witness the 9/11 thing. So I had set up recording equipment, and one day I just called some guys in the neighborhood and we came over and made a record in my apartment.
Unbelievable. So you alluded to 9/11. So I think we all remember where we were. Like, for example, I remember I was in Philadelphia going to school and I was late for a class. So I was telling my roommate, we got to go. And he's glued to the TV. I'm like, well, we got to go. We're going to be late. He's like, you might want to watch this. And then because we're in that Northeast corridor, everything shut down. And then it was just like mesmerized. Classes were canceled, right? So why don't you tell the audience, how that day unfolded for you?
Well, basically, there's a record called Jazz for Peace. It's a CD. It's called Jazz for Peace. It features me with some of the greatest names in jazz who I was playing with at the time. Because like I said, I would have that equipment and then I realized I could call anybody to just come over, hire them and come over to my apartment and play with me. But the thing was, the record would be made so fast because we would come in jazz. It's like, boom, and so I wasn't spending that much time recording, but it did have me be playing with major names. And so I had these great musicians that were playing in my band. So I had like these almost like all-star bands. And on the 10th, there was a photographer who was taking pictures of me, like photographers do in New York. Sometimes they'll like say, hey, can I take pictures of you? Because they think maybe you're going to be famous in the future. And they'll have the pictures for when you weren't famous. And those are valuable to them. And then they give you the negatives and you get free photos. So there was a woman doing that on the 10th. And only a few hours later, that woman calls me, which was the next morning, all frazzled because she had a job down on Wall Street to pay for her photography habit. And she was like, oh my God, it's something going on. I says, listen, let me just go up and take a look because I'm on the 5th floor and the roof is right above me. So the roof is, I just open up a little trap door and walk out. Well, I was like, walk down, hoping to tell her, hey, listen, calm down. Someone flew a kite broke a window, something like that. But it wasn't. And that was when I felt like I was walking into a movie. And while I was watching those events, words kept coming out onto a piece of paper. And those words are what I decided to live by for at least a couple days, walk the walk on this planet, be who I authentically was, what I authentically really am for a few days and see what happens. And here I am today doing the same thing, following the words of a poem ever since.
One of the things that I'm curious about is when people go through something really traumatic like 9/11, right? They remember where they were, but then they go through some, like these stages, right? Denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and then acceptance, right? But it sounded like there was a clarity for you to come up with the poem Jazz for Peace. Can you share, like, how did that unfold where you had this calmness? Is it because you've been practicing this higher level of consciousness through music that allowed you to reconcile the tragedy, but also see it from a different perspective?
Well, here's one thing that I had learned through music, because music is an unbelievable thing to execute. As a jazz musician, you show up at jam sessions. You don't even know who the people are. You show up on a stage with people. You don't even know what song they're going to call. What if you don't know the song very well? What if you can't play it? What if they play different than you? There's all kinds of variables in that. As a classical musician, you're playing notes, zillions of notes now that you have to know by memory. And you not only have to remember those notes, but you have to somehow seamlessly make, music with them, So, I mean, somebody with a photographic memory might never screw up the notes, but then he might not play them with anything, Somebody else who can really play the notes, well, they don't let you read the notes on a concert hall. So you got to play. So anyway, the bottom line is, if you are not at a supreme sense of calm, you don't even have a chance. So that's one thing with music, is that when something happens, someone like me who's been on the stage all of his life and has been in all kinds of, immediately goes into a state of calm, because that's where I have to go in order to execute. I can't execute at a normal state. Now, none of us can, but most of us don't know it. So we panic. Most of us panic. But I already got the memo, you know what I mean? So I already knew. So in other words, you don't even have to tell me. I woke up and I looked at that and went into a spectacular state of calm.
Okay, so then you're in the state of calm, and can you share with the audience again, what were the words or the phrasing or the poem that came to you? And was it just, you just couldn't help and it was just gushing out? Like you didn't have to put any thought, and it just was just your hand was on autopilot?
Well, what happened was words were just like spinning around and they were like looping. So in other words, the words were just zing, zing, and I'm like, I got to grab a piece of paper, just write these 5 words down so that something else, because in other words, I can't even think anything else. I can't think another thought until those words are out. So I would purge 5 words on a piece of paper. That's what I would do. And then I just purge them. And then I could, navigate the situation, trying to figure out what to do next, try to, look at what's happening. I don't know, just the whole thing was going on. But every now and then new words were coming and I was just purging them onto the page so that I could free up so that they wouldn't, be on this auto loop. You see what I mean? And my brain wouldn't be on the auto loop with words just going around. So at the end of the day, all I had was a sheet full of words on it. And I looked at the words and then I titled it. The title I gave those group of words was Jazz for Peace. And what I usually do, one of the reasons I told you I'd usually play on everything, because I'm out of piano now, is I will recite those words and do a kind of an improvisation underneath that's completely unique to that moment, to the moment in time.
And was that the first time or only time that you were in this situation where you had this auto loop
the first time that happened?
Yeah, or only time, or does that happen a lot?
It's the only time. Now, that would happen. Okay, so I would compose that way. So in other words, I would get a melody in my head, but it would be the reverse. Basically, I would get a melody in my head and I would try to keep that melody in my head until I could write it down. So that would be as close as I would get to the auto loop. In other words, I would get an interesting melody. I'm like, wow, that's so cool. I hope I'll still remember that melody by the time I get back to my apartment or whatever, where I can write it down, So sometimes I didn't have cell phones, but, if I could have, I would literally try to sing the melody into the phone or something like that. But so that would happen where something was looping inside my head, but I would have to keep it looping so that I wouldn't forget the melody by the time I wrote it down. This was a situation where I really couldn't get anything else to come in my head until I got those words out.
And then when you witness such tragedy in a close proximity, like in New York City, like I was in Philadelphia, like you're actually seeing that, what potential shifts or changes immediately or thereafter did you witness? Like it could be, emotional, spiritual, physical, what changes changed for you?
Well, the real change was that I was realizing, I have a lot of unique perspectives that could affect our world in a positive way. At least I believed I did at that time. Again, what interested me about your show is it's transformation after 40. You know what I mean? So all the people on your show have had 40 years of life experience before they transform. And that's a big thing. So, I had a lot of life experience to be able to finally say something, to be able to go out on a limb, and say, hey, I'm going to take my chances with some of these thoughts and ideas and things that I've learned. And I think it's about time that the world considers the possibility. See, the thing is, there's a little bit of a disconnect between Western culture, because in the West, we have, capitalism. And what we like to do with capitalism is we like to cherry pick the little things out of something that fit our model. And what we've been doing is with music is like, okay, this is entertaining music. Let's just take the entertaining part out, and you know what I mean? This helps to sell beer, let's sell products and beer and whatever. With this is great for background music to a scene, and we're using it very specifically, right? But I had studied music on a wide breadth, and I had known that historically it was very possible that music, and I learned eventually dealing with indigenous people around the world, people use music for healing. People use music for medical issues. There's all kinds of qualities music has for our species throughout the centuries. And,
And then, so Rick, you just mentioned that, UnLost Cause focuses on people who are 40 and above. And then how old were you when 9/11 occurred and you wrote the poem Jazz for Peace?
I believe I was 40. So I was 40 right then. I was born in 1961, so I was 40.
And then so then after you write the poem, there's still a lot of things happening. People are trying to figure out what is still going on. What happens next? Like, so you get this loop out of your brain and onto a piece of paper, right? But then do you have were you just relieved to get it out, or did a mental map unfold in you about, I see my purpose, I need to take it to follow A, B, C, D, E, F, G to positively impact the world in a different way?
I did not know. I just knew that 9/11 happened. I saw it from less than a quarter of a mile away, and I have something from that. And that's a bunch of words out of paper. What's going to happen next? I don't know. But the only way for me to find out is to kind of trust the universe and allow that message to come to me. So allow the world to bring it. The world's spinning around me now. I'm not spinning around it anymore.
So then tell the audience what does happen next. Like, what was the next major step that you do for this Jazz for Peace? Because it eventually becomes a nonprofit and a global movement that it is now. So what were some of the initial steps to get that momentum going?
One step at a time. So the first thing was words on a piece of paper. And 2 weeks went by, the whole country was shut down. But then all of a sudden, like on just one day, boom, they opened up the country. And I looked at my schedule and I'm like, wow, they just opened up the country. And technically I'm supposed to be in Savannah, Georgia tomorrow or something like that. So I called out.
So they didn't cancel?
No, because they opened the country in time.
Wow. Okay.
Like they didn't know if they were going to be able to have it. You know what I mean? But once the country was open, they had it all scheduled. They're like, well, we can have a jazz festival here in Savannah because the country's back open. So they said, get yourself down to you got to get down here. And I said, well, what's going on? Like, how many people are going to be at this thing? They said 8,500 people are going to be there, and you're the headliner. So 8,000 people are going to hear you on Sunday, or whatever it is, 2 days from now. So I had to grab my band, get on a plane, get down to Savannah, Georgia. And now I'm sitting on a stage in front of 8,500 people with a poem that nobody knows about, including the musicians in my band. So I figure what better way, what better next step is there to do with this poem than read it to 8,500 people? So I read the poem to the people right on the stage. And everybody, even the musicians, were emotional. So it was an incredibly emotional moment. And those words that I spoke resonated and started working their way north. And by the time I got back to New York, I was getting calls from the next place I had a concert in. They're like, what the hell did you just do in Savannah, Georgia?
So that impact was starting to ripple through your schedule. And then these other organizers were saying they didn't know what it was, but they're like, we want some of that as well.
Well, someone said, is there any chance you're going to put that to music for our event? They just threw that out there. So then I was like, wow, I don't even need to figure out what to do next now. They just told me, like already I know they think it would be great if that was put to music. Like, they want to know if I'm going to do it. So I figured, well, I guess that could be the next step. So then I basically put something together for us to play. And I, again, kind of recited the words over that music. And then the press got a hold of it. And they were like, Dada starts out concert with Jazz for Peace. So that Jazz for Peace was really launched then. Technically, that is the first Jazz for Peace concert, which next year is the 25th anniversary of. And like I said, it was the press that just all of their write-ups mentioned that I started the concert out with Jazz for Peace.
And so I'm curious, is that your signature way to start all your concerts and performances, to recite that and riff off of that?
It could be, but I can't say it is. I really can't. I mean, I just happened to open that show with that. I just happened to open the show that way.
Yeah. So, and you opened it, and then the press gets a hold of it. And this is like even before like social media really took off. I mean,
way
it'd be
before,
like
yeah.
TikTok trending everywhere.
There was no Facebook, yeah.
Yeah. So this is like good old fashioned virality back in the day. So did you realize you had a bit of a tiger by the tail? And then the next step would be like, if you did realize, like, what am I going to do with this, or how am I going to leverage this?
I just thought, again, well, I've got 3 steps in. What's the next step? I don't know, but I do have these articles that came out in the press. So the next step might be to play some Jazz for Peace, play some concerts or little shows around New York and call them Jazz for Peace, because these are things that I can make happen. You know what I mean? I'm a jazz musician in New York City, so I can do a couple things and call the shows Jazz for Peace. So that was the next step. And then the next thing I knew, while I was doing that and still being a musician and still doing other things, I was telling my manager to just call over to the United Nations, tell them who I am, and tell them that I would like to put together a multicultural band, and a show of how music brings people together, nations together in a positive way. And so she thought I might be a little crazy. And I was like, well, I really don't, do it in your free time. Like, just call over there, see where they redirect you, see what they do. And about almost a year later, she was, briefing me on a couple of things. I had something in Paris. I remember she's telling me with a bass player and drummer from New York who lived in Paris. And I was going to take that drummer and go to Milan. And then I was going to pick up an Italian bass player. And we were going to play this gig in Milan. And then someone was going to pick me up and bring me to Luxembourg. And then she said, oh, and by the way, that United Nations thing came through. They want to do that. So I said, okay. And she said that you have one sponsor that's the such and such, I don't know, the World, I don't know, I forgot the name, but they're on the flyer, the World, whatever, blah, blah, blah. She said, but you do need one more sponsor. And I had written a song for a guy who wrote a book it was a book about if Christ came back to the world, or if a Christ-like figure came today, what would it be like? He wrote a book, he called it Joshua. And I had written Joshua's song for his book. And there was a chorus touring around singing this song I wrote, and they were asking me what they could do for me. And I was like, I don't really know what you guys could do for me. I really don't know. I mean, I don't need a singing telegram or anything, So I don't know what you guys can do. But I was like, oh, I know what they could do. They could be the other sponsor for this United Nations event, which they did. So they came through as the other sponsor, the Joshua Foundation. And between the two sponsors now, and I told her, I said, listen, I don't care who you get and where they're from, except one thing. I need you to have one Israeli musician and one Palestinian musician in the band. This is just something at the top of my head. I thought, I want to do this. I want to make sure that people know we're uniting Israeli, Palestinians, and Americans, because I had known there was a long-standing issue over there. And I play with musicians that are Israeli, Palestinian in New York City, and you can't tell that there's any problem. So I can do this, no problem. I can put them in. So I said, make sure you have those two, and then wherever they're from, I don't care if they're from Vienna, I don't care. But you got to have that. So just get that together, and then throw whoever else you want in the band and send us all over there. And we went over there and played a concert, which is now considered the most significant cultural event of our time.
Unbelievable. So I want to dig into this a little bit more. So how many people were in the band? And then you had a Palestinian and an Israeli, but Unless it was super big, like if it's like 50 people, then you don't have to go through. But if it was like 6 or 8 or whatnot, what were the other nationalities of this amazing group of folks that you
Well,
assembled?
really, it was Europe. The drummer was from Europe, and that's why I said Vienna. The drummer actually was from Austria, the saxophone player may have been a hybrid of a couple of things, So maybe he had some Asia in him. I don't know, but basically, I knew we had a multicultural band with the Israeli Palestinian, and I knew I was going to run with that baton because uniting Germans and Austrians is not going to get me very far. You know what I'm saying? But uniting Israelis and Palestinians, that's got some, to me, this is just the way I'm thinking, that's something you could run with if you could do that. And the thing is, I did, and other people did think it was very strange that I could unite Israelis and Palestinians through music and nobody else could. Because I would go to a dinner party and I would say, guess where I was earlier today? So where I was in a house and one guy was Israeli and the other guy was Palestinian. We were playing jazz. So those guys are supposed to be like at war. They're supposed to hate it. What are you talking for sure? I said, I'm positive. So people were shocked. But like I said, when 9/11 came, there's all kinds of things that I knew that if the rest of the world knew, I just thought the rest of the world would be better off knowing. But only I knew it, and who's going to pay attention to little old me? But after 9/11, I thought, if I have a chance to show the world something that I know and they don't, I think I'm going to do it because this is getting out of hand here. Blowing up the World Trade Center, that's a bit much for my comfort zone when I'm that close.
And then in terms of like the reception to this UN multinational band that you got together, this performance, what was the reception from the press? And was it a turning point in the organization's growth, or was it where it really accelerated it, or was it just more of a steady, like what you're saying, one step at a time, next stepping stone?
Yeah, it was just another step because in the arts, you do something significant. Sometimes it takes 25 years for the public to even catch up. So it's, I just knew that it was time to get that knowledge out to the world. But the press wasn't really covering it. And, they still don't cover it. But as time went on, I started noticing when I would get letters from world leaders and prestigious supporters of organizations that I was performing for, when I would get letters from them and I would travel to different countries, they noticed it. And one of the first persons that noticed it actually was when I played a concert in Chicago and a letter showed up from Barack Obama. And in that letter, which we have online, people can read our letters. It said, what you did at the, uniting Israelis and Palestinians, what you did at the United Nations was big time. It's basically what it says. But I would say read the whole letter yourself. It's jazzforpeace.org/Obama-letter.pdf. And if you just type that in, you just see the letter yourself. But you can see what he says. And I didn't see why they shouldn't acknowledge it right away because I thought it was a big major thing to do. But I don't even know if the musicians, if they even knew or what, who knows what they were thinking. And like I said, when I started to get letters from them, I remember getting another one down from a congressman and a congressman in Florida for a concert I was doing down there. They started mentioning the significance of that United Nations event. You see what I mean? So that's when I realized that people, I don't know how much time it's going to take them, but at some point or other, hopefully not after I'm dead and gone, they'll see that it was not a bad idea.
So, and then you said you just celebrated the 25th year anniversary of Jazz for Peace.
The 25th year anniversary of the first Jazz for Peace event that I'm telling you about, where I recited the poem kind of under music and the press said, jazz starts, concerts, that's coming up next year. That's it. And then the year after is the 25th anniversary of the United Nations event is the year after. So I've had these they're like medium psychic people call me. And one of them is an astrologer. And he's the first one, but other ones, but this astrologer said, I need to talk to you. And I need to have you on my podcast. And when I got on the podcast, he said, I've been doing all kinds of readings about you and, all that stuff. And he said, you're going to see a huge, fast wake-up call, the whole world pulling together between now and these 25th anniversaries. They're like energy is being pulled. So something is pulling people to these major points. So I don't know. I do sense things are speeding up. with people acknowledging things, understanding.
Yeah. So then what worse in terms of like where the foundation or the movement or nonprofit is right now, is it like a dedicated team that's putting on these concerts and doing a lot of fundraising, or is it just much more ad hoc with Rick, going to a concert here, a concert there, depending on your schedule and, who calls you? Like, what is the organization of the movement like right now?
Well, we've proven something with our 850 benefit concerts, and now I need the world to catch up to the fact that we have proven that we can solve the world's problems by helping those who are helping others, and that this needs to be done on a, what would you say, a kind of, I forget what's, it's when like you double something and then you double something and then you double something, a drop of water fills up a whole stadium. I forgot that word. It's a word that's
like compounding or
compounding. It's a better word,
yeah.
but similar to that. But on a compounding level, if you would do that energy, if you would do what we did, you could really address the world in a major way. But now I've come into all kinds of other solutions. Jazz for Peace is full of solutions, and we are just looking for people that have the will so that we can provide the way. And that's what we were doing with our benefit concert series, because we knew enough about music and we knew enough about events that if an organization was doing something great in the world and they had the will to go to the next level, we could take them there. We could make them more sponsored. We could make them more publicized. We could make them more prestigious. We could make them better funded. We could expand their donor base. We could do 7 things that we call an empowerment tree. So we knew we could do that. Now we've proven that. And so, that's we actually have a page, jazzforpeace.wordpress.com/about. And if you go to that page, you'll see, everything that I said. There's proof that Jazz for Peace, that helping those who can help others on a grand scale could, change our world exponentially. Exponential is the word, by the way. Exponential function. But the other thing we've learned, that if you go to that page, you'll see what Jazz for Peace has done with nothing. Now, I know there's a lot of billionaires out there and they get PR firms, and the PR firm wants to make them look good and the public, and does this big dog and pony show of what great philanthropists there are. But go to that page and now try to find that on a billionaire's website. Good luck. If you find it, I'll tell you right now, it won't be 1 billion times greater, which is what it should be, because we did this with nothing. So the point I'm trying to make is that we can solve a big problem right now in the world. Very obviously, very simple. We're funding war at 100%. We're funding peace at 0. Okay? We need to fund. It's a simple solution. If you fund peace at 100%, forget it. And if you funded peace, David, at even 1%, if you look at the money that goes into war, all that stuff, the trillions, if you just funded at 1%, you wouldn't recognize this world as you know it. So I'm sitting on even bigger solutions than I had back then.
And I saw on the homepage or the website that you also were traveling to Africa. I think it was like
time. So that's why I'm saying we've already, not that we're not going to continue the benefit concert series. We are, absolutely. But yeah, just Africa, we've been to 9 times, over 850 concerts to help the world's most outstanding causes.
And these 850 concerts, are they all you, or are there people who have the will and you show them the way and then they run it underneath the Jazz for Peace kind of brand umbrella?
I'll give you an example, because you're in Seattle. The first time I went to Africa was Rwanda, and they brought me and 4 other musicians of my choosing down from Rwanda. And I just picked some musicians that I had been playing a lot with over the years and that were close friends of mine. And the 4 of us went to Rwanda and did the first concert there. But like Seattle, I've been there so many times. There used to be a little jazz club called Tula that would host a lot of the events, but I've been to other places. Okay, so Tula's, I play there a lot of times. The Maiden Bower, a beautiful auditorium. It's in Bellevue. I played there. But yeah, so what would happen is I would play with a musician or whatever, and he would be like, wow, your mission is unbelievable. This is incredible, blah, blah, blah. I said, well, if you want to be a part of it, maybe you could help, help when I get another call, when I'm coming out there, I'll call you. You can grab different musicians, whatever. So sometimes there's, musicians out in Seattle who I've played with, and again, who, would help me organize those events. And I've never played solo in Seattle, but I have played, and maybe one time I played solo in Seattle, but all the other times were with trios and quartets and stuff like that. Bass drums, maybe saxophone player too. It just depended on the situation. But we actually had the Jazz for Peace big band, just to give you an idea. So that was like, I think, 15-piece band. So it varies the size of the band. Some, like Pakistan, there's no jazz musicians, and I wasn't going to bring anybody over there because the United States told me not to go myself. So I'm like, I'm not going to bring any other people. So that was solo. I went there, played myself, and made it back alive.
And then for these Jazz for Peace concerts, is a portion of the proceeds go to the foundation to, further the mission and the cause?
Actually, it's an amazing model. More than 100% goes to the outstanding cause. What we do is, it's like growing a tree. It's modeled after a tree. So we're, that tree, that's the genius. The tree is the genius. And we just look at what does that tree does? How is that tree so successful? Well, it starts out with a little seedling calls the ground. That seedling is a comment that we receive from the organization. So let's say you share this podcast with an outstanding cause in the Seattle area or wherever you come across one. Hey, check this out. These guys might be able to, they've helped 850 people. Maybe they'll be able to help you. They watch your podcast. They send a comment. Dear Jazz for Peace, we've seen David's show. Whatever they want to say is their seedling. Whatever comes out. Boy, we really like that music he played or the poem he recited or whatever. And with the interview, whatever it is, that comes out. That is the seedling that we grow the tree. Now, what would we need? We need comments from other people now. So we'll put together some kind of a little one page, share with them. They send it back and forth till they like it. And now they share that little document with their board members, and they get comments from the board members. Maybe they share it with a couple of benefactors. Maybe they share it with some volunteers. And though that just grows the roots, simple, right? Grows the seedling into roots. Now, I told you I want to expand an organization's donor base. We look at the comments, some of those comments are extraordinary. They just always are. Some are good, but some people are like, oh my God, how come CNN didn't tell me about this? Whatever. So we're like, how about if we make some of your friends VIP guests of honor, since you believe in this cause and you get it with Jazz for Peace and you believe in the cause. Why don't you show this to your friends? You know what I mean? So a few of them will do that. That expands the roots to what you see when you look in the ground. Do you know what I mean? That expanded roots of a tree, just like a tree. So now we have the tree roots. And now we have half of our motto, which is help us plant the roots so we can grow your empowerment tree. And we just repeat the same thing over and over again with a different result because every tree is different. You know what I mean? Every tree looks different. So every empowerment tree we grow with somebody is unique. But what is pretty amazing is the letters we receive from them that we really helped them. And that's what how could you say that? Ungaslights me. You know what I mean? Because I could easily just okay, well, I hope that worked out for you. No, they send me a letter. Hey, you got to keep doing that. Was, this is, it's in their words. We just put it on that site. So I told you, jazzforpeace.wordpress.com/about. Just scroll down. If you get to the bottom, you get a prize. Because we had the prize down there. Nobody's supposed to make it there. We're talking like 800 testimonials. You know what I'm saying?
Wow.
Yeah. So I just tell people, just go do like they do on Wheel of Fortune, spin the wheel. Just stop and then just read whatever it is. Read a few random testimonials, wherever they are in that, and you'll get it. You'll see, because the enthusiasm is the same. It's just everybody words it differently.
So now with 850 concerts around the world under your belt, what's next for Rick DellaRatta and/or Jazz for Peace?
We have, unfortunately, I hate to tell you, I have solutions that could solve major problems in our world. And so I've got to do what I did that morning and say, look, I don't care that it's just little old me. I've got to get the word out at these solutions and see if anybody wants to give them a try. And, that situation in the Middle East, we did a poll and we delivered a peace proposal, and we did a poll of people that could vote on that, and they could vote to escalate the situation. They could vote to keep the situation there where it was, and they could vote for the Jazz for Peace proposal and how we want to implement that to heal that region. 96% voted in favor of that. 96%. Only 4 people vote. Only 4% voted to continue the way it was. And zero actually wanted it escalated, and that's what it did. It got escalated. So my point is, it doesn't matter what it is. You could throw anything at me, and I might have something positive to say in terms of positive way to solve it. We have a trickle-down economy, right? It doesn't help. It's not beneficial. Jasper Peace proposes of a trickle-up economy only for philanthropy to run independently and coincide to balance out the problems with the trickle-down economy. So first of all, people have to listen, just like they eventually listen to what we did in the United Nations, eventually listen to what we wanted to do for outstanding causes. And like I said, then we have to have the will, because we can provide the way only if you have the will. It's all a partnership.
And then, are you proud of what you've been able to accomplish, Rick?
I haven't really had time to rest on my laurels. I just really haven't. I get a vicarious thrill at the pride of others, or when people, I feel, wow, this guy's really done something with his life, or wow, this guy's really made a difference. So I would say vicariously I am. So, when I see people like you that want to have me on the show and stuff like that, and I'm happy for you, what you get out of it. You've looked at the material and you were impressed. So I'm happy. So I would say I'm more vicariously happy. Now, deep down inside, I probably have some inner sense of satisfaction of things that I've achieved, but boy, it's a lot of work. I'm more looking at what can I do next than I am, why don't I take a nice big nap with a Mai Tai.
And then, yeah. So you talk about you thinking about what you might do next, and for the audience who they may have a simmering cause and they don't know if it's a lost cause or should they have the courage to jump and try to make an unlost cause. What would you say to those people who are just sitting on something and trying to hem and haw and should they lean in or not?
One thing I would ask them to do is go to a new page that we just developed. And so this is the kind of thing that we're doing. This is something new that we just developed. It's called jazzforpeace.org/pain into purpose PDF. And they can go that and they can see that Jazz for Peace is predicting a transformation from billionaires to visionaries, because our world has basically been run by about 200 or so billionaires, and that's fine. But now with technology and now with AI and all things to assist us so that we don't have to do the things that they needed us to do in order to advance. I mean, you needed actual people to, whack that cotton or whatever it was they were doing, put those General Motors, put those things together. Now that we have machines that can do these things, right? And the jokes do get better as we go along, David. I forgot to tell you that. But I have to throw comedy in, otherwise I'll really
love it.
Jump off this balcony. So, but the thing is, now that we have these things in place, if we use them correctly, we can create a world where the Mozarts of tomorrow survive. And you don't have this tragic ending, or the great Bill Evans piano players, or the Martin Luther Kings don't need to get assassinated. You know what I mean? Maybe all these great people. And guess what? If you give them a little protection, more people are going to be great with their life, because it's going to be it's going to be less dangerous to reach your potential. But if we have that transition, I think we need to have it, because it's guys like the ones you're talking about that we need to solve our problems. That person inside that you're bringing up, he probably has a passion within him that would help make in his own way, add a drop to a better world if we unleashed that passion, let him do his thing. So that document will help him. That's what I would suggest. Check out that document.
No, we'll get all the links afterwards so that we can put them in the show notes so that we can share with the audience. And then, one question that I always love to ask all guests are, what ask do you have of the UnLost Cause community, right? And, some people come up with a very macro one, some come up with a very micro one. So I'm curious, Rick, what ask would you have of the community?
I would love for the community to see if they can locate an outstanding cause in their community that they feel, hey, if this organization, whether it's a food, I don't care if it's a soup kitchen, it's fine. If this organization was better funded, if this organization had more sponsors, if this organization had more donors, if this organization was more prestigious, with doing prestigious supporters coming on board and stuff like that. A bunch of those things in that empowerment tree, which you can see at our website, and the other links I have you up get to that empowerment tree, that our community or our world or our society would be a better place, and get this podcast into their hands and ask them to contact us at info@jazzforpeace.org. Because see, here's the thing. We don't have the resources to go into all of your towns. We don't know what towns you're into for the first place. I don't know where your listener could be in Tuscaloosa, right? But I don't know where that is. And I don't know the nonprofits there. He does. You know what I mean? So yeah, I could use you guys because what we want to do, everything I do is about separating the wheat from the chaff. That's what really comes down. I know that comes with the Bible, but that's an amazing thing. It's an amazing sentence, so that separate the wheat from the chaff. So in other words, there are some nonprofits that might be better tax shelters than they are, serving humanity. Do you know what I mean? And I don't need to do a concert for them, but the ones that your viewers uncover, that could be one where I could really feel like my efforts really made a difference. And I want to make sure every note I play makes as big a difference as I can.
And then for the listeners and the viewers who are inspired by you today, Rick, how can they follow or support your work? Website, social links, share with us what they are.
Well, like I said, World Peace is funded at zero. And we have, our website, jazzforpeace.org, has a little donate button at the bottom. And boy, if someone just sent a little donation, even whatever little they wanted, and said, hey, this is from David's show, you were on, and I just want to do my little part today. Or, they can go to the bottom, click on that donate button, jazzforpeace.org. Of course, info@jazzforpeace.org is our website, is our email address to get a hold of us. And it's also, you can make a payment through Zelle. You can make a contribution through Zelle through that as well. But ultimately, we are on a journey to take funding for world peace from where, just like we took outstanding causes from where you are now to where you need to be. We want to take funding for world peace from where it is now and zero to where it needs to be, which is 100.
And then is that also, if they want to see what upcoming Jazz for Peace or Jazz for Peace affiliated concerts, would they also go to the homepage, or is there a calendar link or a social like on Instagram or TikTok that they should follow?
There is. It's kind of all over the place, because let's say we have something in Nigeria. I don't know what's coming out of the Nigerian Post or whatever, or something like that. But what you can always do is, again, you can always reach us by email if you're not sure, like, hey, I heard you guys are coming out traveling. I heard you're doing something in my region. I can't find the information. If you ever have trouble finding out about our performances, just drop us an email. We have volunteers who check the box, even if I can't check every single message myself.
All right, listeners, we have a bonus treat. Rick is going to perform off the cuff for the first time. This is a song you've never played before, right?
You are 100% correct. It's a request from a volunteer. We're getting close to 4th of July here, and David told me this will be after 4th of July when you guys see this, but the people getting pumped up for 4th of July, and someone said if you could play this on a podcast, they would be just thrilled. And I'm like, okay, I'll try to pull a rabbit out of my hat and see what I can do. But I'm going to incorporate the Jazz for Peace poem, the words to that, somehow put it all together. I don't know what I'm going to do yet. David is correct, but somehow it'll all come together, I hope.
We've been traveling far without a home, but not without a star. Free, only want to be free. We huddle close, hanging on to a dream. On the boats and on the planes, they're coming to America, never looking back again. They're coming to America. Don't seem so far away. We're traveling night to day in the eyes of a storm, in the eyes of a storm. Home to a new and shiny place. Make our bed and we'll say our grace. Freedom light burning warm. Freedom light burning warm. Everywhere around the world, they're coming to America. Every time that flag's unfurled, they're coming to America. They're coming to America. They're coming to America. Today, 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 they're coming to America. I heard jazz for peace coming through the trees, and in my heart it fills me like a celebration. I see the light and I want to follow, inspired by the past contributions of those who came before and laid the groundwork for us to build on. In this universal language that is a gift for all mankind. When we speak it, people are inspired by the creativity and artistry that stands for peace and love and humanity and intelligence that leads to reaching potential that we have in our souls. So we can raise our total conscience. and see that the gift of giving is our greatest privilege. I hear jazz for peace.
Wow. Bravo. That was amazing. So that's the first time you've ever done that?
First, yeah.
Unbelievable. And then when you're in that groove, your eyes are closed, or do you just feel like something just talking to your fingers and it just moves?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of need some help. I mean, I need some, there's got to be some higher power out there. If there's one, I need it. I'm trying to get it to come into this room and come through me and move my fingers and kind of move the music and inspire the music. So it's kind of like you have to open up a channel and keep that channel open for something, for things to flow through you. And since that's what we do in music in order to overcome like what could otherwise be an extremely stressful moment, right? But thinking blocks it. So by keeping that channel open, hey, who knows what could happen if we just maybe did some of that in real life?
Well, thank you so much, Rick. And, in closing, from the ashes of 9/11, Rick DellaRatta didn't just rise, he elevated others. His path from celebrated jazz artist to global peace ambassador reveals what happens when talent meets mission. Jazz for Peace is more than a concert series. It's a call to raise our collective consciousness, and Rick's life is a reminder that art, when rooted in purpose, can rewrite the future of humanity. Thanks again, Rick.
My pleasure, Tim.
Before you go, if you're inspired and want to be a part of something bigger, subscribe, like, and share to help more people reclaim their dreams and live true to themselves. Also, let me know if you or someone you know would be an inspiring guest on this show. Together, let's spark courage to live without regrets. The UnLost Cause way, one story and one person at a time.